Good evening, everyone. We're going to call tonight's meeting to order, and we will start with an approval of the agenda. Can I get a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Stevens and Councillor McIntosh. All in favor? And that is carried. Any disclosures of direct or indirect pecuniary interest tonight? Seeing none, we will rise for the singing of our national anthem if you are able.
O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
We would like to acknowledge the treaty lands and territory of the Williams Treaty Nations and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. We also recognize that Dufferin County is the traditional territory of the Wendat and the Haudenosaunee and is home to many Indigenous people today. Tonight's meeting is being aired on public television and or streamed live and may be taped for later public broadcast or webcast. Your name is part of the public record and will be included in the minutes of tonight's meeting. Any member of the public who's connecting via telephone is reminded to press *6 to mute and unmute, and please to remain muted until the chair requests comments or questions from the public. Tonight we are holding a statutory meeting followed by a non-statutory meeting, and at this time I will turn the chair over to Deputy Mayor Taylor.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much, Mayor Post. A few procedural things first off before we start our meeting. All members of the public are permitted to speak to the statutory public meeting agenda items. However, only residents, taxpayers, service providers, or members speaking on behalf of an association or organization that serves the town of Orangeville are permitted to speak to non-statutory public meeting items. All members of the public are welcome to submit correspondence to any item on the agenda, which will be considered public information and entered into the public record. So at this time, item 7, which is a statutory public meeting as per the Planning Act regarding file OPZ 2022-01, which pertains to 48, 50, 50A, and 52 Broadway. Anyone who would like to speak to this matter, please call 1-289-801-5774 and enter conference ID 504-678-344#. Callers will be invited to provide their questions or comments following the conclusion of the presentation. Any member of the public connecting via telephone is reminded to press *6 to mute and unmute. Anyone who wants to be notified of further consideration of this topic, please submit your name, phone number, mailing address, and email address to clerksdepartment@orangeville.ca or call 519-941-0440 extension 2242 and reference OPZ-2022-01 PM 2025-001. So it's at this time that I would like to call on our presenter. Would you like to come forward? Very good. You could just introduce yourself and enjoy.
So, can everybody hear me okay? My name is
Very good.
Ostremski. I'm an associate with MHBC Planning. We're the planners for the registered owners of the property on this application. We also have here today in attendance Deborah Walker. Okay. There we go. We also have in attendance here today Deborah Walker, who's a partner at MHBC, and we have Peter Bruce, who's a project manager at RJ Burnside. Virtually, we also have Coleman Christensen, who's principal at Ace Architecture. They were the architects on the project. So this public information meeting is related to the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment for the properties at 48, 50, 58, and 52 Broadway. For our presentation, I'll provide an overview. So I'll be talking about the subject lands, the surrounding land uses, the timeline of key dates, and the proposed development. And then I'll turn it over to Deborah, who's going to talk about additional details related to the OPA and the ZBA, as well as the site plan, typical floor plans, and so on. So here's a location map. Hoping everybody can see this. The lands are located on the south side of Broadway, directly southwest of the intersection of Broadway and 4th, approximately 500 meters west of Highway 10. They're comprised of 48 to 50 Broadway being the easterly parcel shown here, 50A Broadway being the central parcel shown, and 52 Broadway being the western parcel. Lands are currently occupied. The total area is 0.96 hectares, approximately 2.37 acres. Lot frontage of approximately 139 meters along Broadway. Subject lands are occupied by a one-story commercial building containing an auto body shop on the northern portion of 48 to 50, and a parking area on the northern portion of 50A and 52 Broadway. Mill Creek flows through the subject lands, separating the lands in an east-west parts. So on the location map here, you can see the general location of the CVC 24-meter meander belt. The 6-meter meander belt buffer is shown in green, as well as the development site shown in orange, and then in a highlighted yellowy color, it's the proposed OPA ZBA application lands. So here's a map of the surrounding context and transit network. So the subject lands are located approximately 160 meters or a 2-3 minute walk east of the area identified as a downtown or the central business district, as shown here in the red dash. The lands are a transition area into the downtown area and are within an important gateway as identified by the site-specific policy and the town official plan. The surrounding land uses in the immediate area, as shown on this map, consist of mainly commercial uses along Broadway, with some mixed uses as well, including a recent mixed-use development directly to the west at 60 and 62 Broadway. There are some low, medium, and high-density residential uses to the north and south of these lands on Broadway. There's also a variety of community services and open spaces within close proximity to subject lands, which include schools, places of worship, a library, and several parks. Transit's available along Broadway as well, with access to the GO Bus Route 37 Orangeville-Brampton line and the blue, green, and Orangeville Transit bus routes. In terms of the existing uses on site, the top picture here on 48 to 50, this is the one-story commercial building containing an auto service facility. And at the bottom picture, this is the parking area on 50A and 52. Sorry. Here's a few additional pictures of the subject lands. In the top row on the very left, you can see westerly toward the subject lands is the parking area, which better is shown in the middle picture there as well, looking at it from the rear. On the very right and top row, we have a view westerly towards Mill Creek. In the second row, first picture on the left is view westerly towards subject lands along Broadway there. And then in the center, we have view easterly towards 48 to 50 Broadway portion. And on the very right, it's basically looking easterly towards 50 and 52. At the very bottom, it's a southerly image towards the western edge of the subject lands. So you can kind of see the relationship with the adjacent property. In the center, it's a view westerly towards 50 and 52 Broadway. And in the bottom right, it's a view easterly towards the southerly edge of the parking area. So just to provide a timeline of key dates, on January 6th of 2022, the application for OPA ZBA was made. Our first public meeting was held on May 9th of 2022. Our second submission then came in a little after that on September 27th, 2022. And then for a period of about a year, from July 2023 to July 2024, the applicant took a pause on the application to work with the agencies on a proposed solution for the rehabilitation of Mill Creek over the subject lands. Took about a year out of the timeline to work through this, but it's a positive action for the community at the applicant's expense. As indicated in the Broadway Mill Creek Rehabilitation Design Brief that was submitted, the applicant is implementing the rehabilitation design efforts related to Mill Creek within the lands that he owns and is discussed with CVC. This will include compensation plantings of trees and shrubs in and around the creek to contribute to the sustainability measures being provided by the proposal. So the results of these efforts will, number one, improve channel stability. Number two, provide for greater resistance to channel erosion. Number three, provide for an ecological benefit to aquatic and terrestrial habitats in Mill Creek. And number four, it'll reduce the meander belt width to 24 meters, providing for more developable land on the applicant's lands. So in terms of the proposed redevelopment, the proposed OPA will redesignate the lands from service commercial to neighborhood commercial special policy area and open space conservation. Proposed ZBA will rezone the lands from service commercial to neighborhood commercial with special provision, open space conservation OS2 with special provision, and open space conservation. So the proposal is for a 6-story, 20-meter high building, which complies with the 23-meter height requirement in the zoning bylaw. There's 841 square meters of ground floor retail being provided, which is an increase of 766 square meters over the existing retail space, or sorry, commercial space, not retail. There's 158 residential units being proposed with an area between 517 to 1,165 square feet, ranging from 1 to 3 bedrooms for attainable housing. The proposal includes 246 parking spaces underground with 56 surface parking spaces for retail and visitors at grade. In terms of the landscaped open space, about 60% of the lot area is being proposed. So the architecture provides a balance existing between Broadway, the character, and surrounding historic Orangeville character while providing for redevelopment. And that aligns with the gateway policy direction and official plan, which we'll go over in a little bit. So the key revisions from the first public meeting to the current resubmission just made last month. Proposed building height has been decreased from 7 stories, approximately 22.85 meters, to 6 stories, 20.6 meters. Number of units has increased from 129 to 158. Proposed retail area has been increased from 408 square meters to 841. The front yard setback has been increased from 1 meter to 2 meters. The east yard setback was increased from 3 meters to 5 meters. And the proposed landscape open space was increased from 39% of the lot area to 60%. So we've worked with town staff on making these changes to create a better proposal. Here's just the north and south elevations that we have, showing the 20.6 meter building height. And then here's the east and west elevations as well. So in terms of the reports that were submitted in support of the applications, we filed a transportation study, a hydrogeological assessment, environmental site assessments, an arborist report, a planning justification report, a creek rehabilitation design brief, a geotechnical investigation, a functional servicing report, an environmental noise assessment, an urban design report, and an ecological land classification characterization memo. I'll now pass over the presentation to Deborah.
Hi, good evening. So there's a policy in the official plan, can you hear me? That is E862, and it deals with this area generally speaking. And it's, as you may know, as Marius has presented, the lands are majority of the lands are designated service commercial. And in this area, it has a special policy, and that special policy indicates that it says the intent of this policy is to reinforce and complement the focus of the East Broadway area as the easterly gateway into town and the entry into the downtown Heritage Conservation District, and the town's continuing efforts to beautify this area. It is anticipated that over time, specific proposals for amendments to the zoning bylaw and redevelopment proposals will be made in accordance with this policy, so as to have the effect of relocating these automotive and automotive-related uses that rely on the outdoor storage and display of motor vehicles and equipment to more appropriate areas of town. Next slide, please. Oh, right. Sorry. So what we're doing essentially is that we are improving an area that is in, I think, dire need of a development. It's going to clean up the site. There's quite a bit of investment needed for that, just to begin with. And it's going to essentially where the official plan amendment is proposing to redesignate that service commercial designation and make it into a neighborhood commercial special policy area. So I'll go through that in a minute, what that means. And essentially, the rest of it is really just redesignating some of the areas that were identified through the more detailed environmental impact study work that we've been working on, as you can see, for a couple of years now with the Conservation Authority. And we are at a point where we're very happy to bring this back forward to you. And I think we're at a point with the Conservation Authority that we've reached some, I think, not only agreement on some fundamental things, but also, as Mary has pointed out, we have been working with them on potential for this restoration, these restoration efforts. So part of the official plan amendment is also, as you can see on the screen, is to essentially designate additional lands, open space. Some of the parts, there's also another little wetland that you can see. It's like a little finger down on the south part that was also requested to be designated through the Aquifer Beach work. So we've done that as well. And so essentially it's going from, I believe the stat is roughly 80% service commercial designation and 20% open space designation. And this official plan amendment will essentially take it from 60% the new neighborhood commercial special policy area designation, and about 40% open space. So that much more open space will be protected. Okay, and the next, oh yeah, sorry, I'm used to someone else controlling this. So as I mentioned, it will implement the proposed official plan amendment. So it implements that special policy that I just went through, and it allows for a mixed use building with ground floor retail space that will front onto Broadway Avenue, just outside of the central business district. And it will have a number of residential units on the upper floors. And it will also, the official plan amendment will set out permitted uses that are appropriate for a mixed use building in this location. And I will go through that in a minute as well. And it will refine the environmental corridor, as I've spoken about already. And actually, before I get into that, the official plan amendment does have, it's not in the presentation, but I just want to point out that the amendment does state, that is proposed to state, that the ground floor commercial uses fronting on Broadway Avenue the commercial uses will be maintained on the ground floor, and the residential uses are on the upper floors. that the permitted uses include townhouses, apartment dwellings, live-work units, as well as a broad range of commercial, office, and institutional uses that are complementary to the central business district area, including business, professional, and government offices, personal and business services of all kinds, outlets for retail and wholesale trade, cultural, recreation, and entertainment facilities, parks, institutions, and community facilities. Surface parking will only be permitted within the 6-meter buffer of the 24 meander to the 24-meter meander belt. It also stipulates that that there is a maximum gross floor area of any individual retail outlet, which would be 20,000 square feet. So you wouldn't have any major big box type retail competing with other large retailers that are in town. And also it will stipulate that the visual impact of parking and loading areas of the primary frontage roads should be minimized through the appropriate location and/or facade of parking and loading facilities and through the use of landscaping. And of course, these things will be the details of some of the architectural control and the facade treatment and that kind of thing will be addressed more so through site plan. Okay. So, whoops, sorry. So going through the zoning bylaw amendment, it's similar to the official plan amendment. We are going to, the areas that are identified in hatching will be rezoned from service commercial to a neighborhood commercial with special provision. And the lands you can see in a crosshatch are to be rezoned from commercial zone to open space, conservation. And then you can see sort of the stippled area. It's like a small, that's the 6-meter buffer. And there's no building allowed in that area, but there is surface parking permitted. And that's something that's pretty consistent with other developments along Mill Creek Corridor that have been worked on with the Conservation Authority, and they are in agreement with that approach. Okay. And so, yeah, the special provision, so the C2 zone will permit retail uses on the ground floor fronting onto Broadway, and then the dwelling units on the upper floors. So the proposed zoning bylaw amendment essentially, it takes the C2 zone, but it also recognizes that it is adjacent to the central business district. It considers this area being part of a gateway to the central business district. It is within close walking distance, of course, to the downtown and all the amenities that offers in a location where housing and retail growth and density is to be directed, and that a large portion of the site will be protected and enhanced for the Mill Creek Corridor. And in terms of the site plan, just to be clear, that the applications that are before you this evening, or that we're discussing this evening, we haven't got that far in terms of a decision quite yet, but today's public meeting is about the official plan amendment and the zoning bylaw amendment. So there is no site plan approval application before you at this time. So there is a concept here, but we're quite excited about it. We think it will be quite a cleanup of the site, and I think will make quite a difference in line with the policies in your official plan. And what the site plan does is it at least the concept demonstrates what can be achieved on the site, but some of the details, of course, will be worked out further through site plan approval. So I think that is about it. I just want to point out that there's a range of, at least from the concept, a range of dwelling units ranging from 3-bedroom down to 2-bedroom and right down to a bachelor. So good range for different types of users in the community. So I think that's about it. We're here for any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Is there anyone from the public that's here this evening that would like to speak to this matter? If you have any questions, just come forward, and you'll have to give up your microphone just for a momentage. And if you're on the phone, we'll come to you in just a second. Go ahead and please state your name and address.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Taylor. I'm David Waugh, and our property's been on most of those maps up there. We're at the top of Amanda, too. I have several questions here. I'll try to be as quick as possible, but if you'd like to note them down, I'll just read through all of them at the same time, because some of them may be related to each other just for expediency.
Thank you.
Number one, I noticed that, of course, the property's gone from 7 stories to 6. But the number of units has gone from 129 to 158. So obviously the units have gotten a heck of a lot smaller. So I'm just wondering, and perhaps this question is more for the council, I'm just wondering if there's a rationale behind that, if that's, to facilitate more, affordable housing, or if that's to, make the property work economically for the owner, just as far as, the delay and the costs with the environmental remediation and such, just
So
rationale.
are you going to go through all of your questions
Yeah,
first?
I'm going quick.
Okay.
Yep, so rationale for the change. Number 2, the CVC component, I'm just wondering, since they've been involved, has that component effectively been pre-approved so long as there's compliance, or is there potential for that still to be a hang-up later? Just as far as the design, I'm wondering if there's rationale for that change as well. Everyone's going to have their personal preference, but just the building itself has become much more boxy in its look. And I'm wondering again if that's sort of an economics driven change, because I personally am not a fan. Other people may like it, but it doesn't look like a fit to me. And I'm just wondering if there's rationale behind that change. And similarly, I guess from a design perspective, there was conversation at a prior public meeting, I think, about the potential for a setback at the upper floors, 5th and 6th, to allow for sunlight to get down to the street level. I do acknowledge that it's been set back at street level from, I think it was 1 to 3 or something like that, but still the setback at the upper floors, I think, is something worth considering. I'm just curious if that was considered as part of the process. And I think there might be one more. The parking in the back. Of course, to accommodate the additional units, I guess the proposed usage of the space, I guess, went from 39% to 60%, which I believe is higher than the proposed zoning bylaw, right? So there would need to be an exception for that, I suppose. But just curious, that parking in the back, particularly since it's near Mill Creek, will any portion of that parking be permeable? I'm not particularly familiar with the technology components of that, but I think that would probably be something worth considering. I don't know what that means from a cost perspective or anything else. Just a question of if that's part of the plan. And the other pieces, some of those reports that were referenced as far as the environmental site assessments, phase 1 and 2, and the rehabilitation design briefs, everything else, where would that be obtainable for the members of the public? Would that be part of the application somewhere else? I assume we could get it. I just was surprised that it wasn't included here. And lastly, I just want to say, particularly as a neighbor to the property, I absolutely support, the development of the space. We're excited by it. So I don't want it to come across as me being anti-development or anything. We're absolutely supportive. I'm just curious to better understand some of these components. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Waugh. You may have set an Orangeville resident record for the most questions in a row.
Sorry.
So,
hopefully they were at least good ones.
Well done. We will be calling Guinness after this meeting. Would anybody like from your team to come up and try that? I've made notes here. We could tackle them one at a time, or how would you like to go about it?
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Waugh. The first one is the rationale for the size change of the residence.
So in terms of, I guess, the land size itself, originally the application was only 48 and 50 Broadway. And the client had 50A and 52 as a backup parking scenario. Through discussions and comments and meetings with the town staff, we decided to revise the proposal to include the building across the entire property. So now it basically includes those 4 properties versus the 2.
Very good. Makes sense. You referenced in your presentation the CVC compliance. I got the impression that was going along quite well and you were working well together and you were down a good road. Is there anything else to add to that, or would that be a good?
You nailed it right on.
Right. Okay, very good. The design change, just the boxy nature of it is not my words, just paraphrasing.
Yeah, in terms of the design, we still have to go through a full site plan approval process. That's mainly when the design details will get sorted out. right? Right now, we're more worried about the building envelope itself.
Very good. The setback enough to allow for natural light?
In our opinion, yes. We did have a shadow study. There do not seem to be any impacts that are caused.
Okay. Mr. Ward, would you like to speak to that at all? Do you concur with that comment about the natural light? Sorry to catch you off guard.
I might pass that over to Ms. Russell if I could. She's fairly familiar with the application.
Ms. Russell?
So yes, I can speak to that. And the original proposal was for 7 stories, and we had discussed with the applicant a step back at the 7th story. And now that the 7th story has been removed, I think town staff are comfortable with the 6th story.
Very good. Thank you very much for that. The next one was talking about the lot coverage, 39 to 60%.
So in terms of the lot coverage itself, give me 1 second. Better refer to the plans here.
The very fact you can speak off the top of your head is impressive enough. So notes are welcome.
I know our landscaped area is about 60%. So the building coverage, I believe, would be about 40%.
But so, Mr. Waugh, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but your question was along the lines of why the increase from the first one to the second one. Is that correct? Yep, I was going to get to that. So I guess it's the size, and I assume would a large portion of it just be the design and the very fact that you've got 2 new lot numbers as well. So 51 and 52 has been added.
Yeah.
Is that fair? Letting you off the hook here? Or?
Absolutely fair. In terms of the permeable pavers themselves, that is something that we'll look at site plan again. That's one of those details that typically gets covered at the site plan approval.
Okay. And then so that's permeable parking is the next one, or is that what you're?
Correct, permeable parking.
Okay. And then the last question is, and maybe it's back to you, Ms. Russell, about where can members of the public find additional information?
Yes, they can contact town staff and we can provide you with a copy of all the submission materials.
Very good. Thank you very much, Mr. Wall. Hopefully that answers your questions. Is there anyone else in the gallery this evening that would like to ask a question regarding this development? Yes, please come forward. Give your name and address, please.
Okay, my name is Nick Gristo. I live at number 20 Paula Court, L9W5V1.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gristo. What's your question?
Well, the question here, I just have a comment. I'm very happy to hear that it's been escalated from 7 stories to about 6 stories, which I think it's mostly appropriate for the area. And also I'm very happy to see that there'll be commercial on the bottom, which that's very important because it's the entrance way to our town. You don't need a 7-story or 8-story building there. That would look pretty, in my opinion, it will look very funny. So, but at least it's scaled down to 6-story. I have no issues with that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Gristo. Any further questions from the gallery? Yes, please, sir. What's your name and address, please?
Matthew Smith, 38 McCarthy Street. I did have a question about obtaining some of the submitted reports, but I know I can contact town staff for that one. I also just want to say I'm in support of this development. It'll be nice to clean up that lot. It's a little bit unsightly when entering into town. It'll be a welcome change to the edge of our downtown area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further comments or questions? Okay, seeing none. Jerry, is there anyone on the line? No, no one on the line at this time. Okay, so moving over to council. Anyone from council have a question? Yes, Councillor Andrews.
Well, thank you, Chair Taylor. Appreciate the presentation from our guests here this evening. The detailed information really helps at this stage of the application for those of us on council understanding exactly where you are. I wanted to focus on a couple of points regarding the site modifications, at least as part of this submission. And I was really curious to hear of your conversation with the CBC. and in particular, some of the remediation that would be required. So first question is on the EA, so the environmental assessment. And this may be a question that's posed to staff as opposed to you, but it may end up correlating to be kind of fluid in your response. What form of remediation will be necessary? What are we talking about? Full site remediation with full extraction of all the soil? Because we know what that site is. It's been, a car repair shop for a number of decades, and I can just imagine the contamination. So what is the process that you're going to have to go through if this is approved? So would this be something the town staff or the applicant would be able to provide us with some understanding of?
Would you like to come up to the microphone? Very good.
Peter Bruce with Burnside Engineering. Yeah, so you mentioned a couple of things.
Yes.
So CVC related to the creek work or the remediation?
Well, it really is kind of a two-pronged question. It's first the site remediation, but it does have reference to, of course, I guess the negotiation that you've had with the CVC. What form of remediation will be necessary, or how's that tributary going to be repositioned? Because that's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, so go back to 2016, and there was an EA done for the entire Mill Creek.
Yeah.
From town line, from the Dragonfly Park right up through town. At the time, because the creek crosses private property, we had to get an agreement with the town. There was an agreement with the town, CVC, and I think Ducks Unlimited at the time did this project to rehabilitate Mill Creek. Permission had to be granted for the private properties of the creek crossed, and at the time, the owners of this stretch from 4852 did not grant permission to cross the property. So the creek work was done up to 48, skipped over, started from the west side of 52 and carried on through town. So the EA was done, the preliminary design was done, just the work was never implemented. So we're not challenging the EA, we're not changing, we just want to implement it now. So basically, the work was started one end, started the other. Now we want to do the work through the portion that was never done back in 2016.
And then pertaining to the part of the question I also had, Chair Taylor, is what can you envision that remediation to look like? So are we talking literally all the soil taken out and new soil put in?
So from the environmental side, from the contamination you're talking of
Yes.
the site, so yeah, all the contaminated material does get taken out.
Mm-hmm.
We don't fill it back in again because we have underground parking.
That's right.
So we're not just going to dig a hole, fill back in with clean material and dig all that back out again. We dig the hole, get rid of all the contamination. The part of the EA process of the environmental site assessment is to delineate the limit of the contamination and basically start excavating. It gets tested as it goes. And once we get to the clean parameter and we know we've got all the contamination out, and then we have basically the hole excavated for the underground parking.
Excellent. May I continue?
Yeah, please.
Thank you. Looking at the design, and again, I understand this is a rendering and things can change as you're going through the process of a site plan design itself. Regarding the access to parking, now, correct me if I'm wrong, what I saw in the rendering was only one entrance exit point. So that is going to be a busy location, especially for the number of parking spots that you have there. Would this be something that you would consider as part of your thoughts to the process of this site, to consider a secondary entrance exit as well?
We would love to.
Okay, all right.
But go back to our first submission, we had an entrance on Broadway, our main entrance closer to 4th.
Yes.
The entrance there. Working with the town's planning consultant, WSP, and also the town peer review of the traffic study, that entrance wasn't going to function well. So we wanted the entrance. The request was, can we shift our entrance to the back of the building so all our underground parking doesn't come directly onto Broadway, because now you're someone coming up a ramp, sitting there on the sidewalk trying to get out, get our entrance to the underground parking to the rear of the building, and then shift the entrance more central to line up across the road where there's entrance into the commercial plaza. So they wanted a single entrance center of the lot that lined up with the entranceway across the road. So traffic flow turning in and out, you don't have staggered intersections.
Okay. And last point, more of a comment, Mr. Chair. I want to thank you for addressing the point of attainable housing. Now, defining what that will be once it's actually built. But as the chair of the town's Affordable Housing Task Force, is something that always catches my ear for anyone that ends up speaking about it. And I do like the fact that you identified, number 3 bedrooms. I still think that in the market that we're in, there may be more of a demand for some 3-bedroom units for consideration and the bachelor units, but you have a robust a number of units that will be there. And I'm hoping at the conclusion of this project, if it's all approved, that we have the housing stock that we need from an attainable housing perspective. And that's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Andrews. Councillor Prendergast.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, through you. The redevelopment of 48 to 52 Broadway is a key opportunity for Orangeville to lead in sustainable development. The efforts to incorporate sustainable design and environmental rehabilitation along the Mill Creek corridor under the Credit Valley Conservation's review are important steps, but I do believe that we can go a bit further. With 60% of the site designated as open space conservation, this project presents us a chance to integrate more green infrastructure, such as permeable pavement, rain gardens, commitment to pollinator-friendly plantings, which are native to our area, perhaps a green roof or enhanced tree canopy commitments. These measures will improve flood mitigation, groundwater recharge, and long-term economic and environmental resilience. Just a bit of background, Will, the county is developing a tri-county green development standard. Orangeville has the opportunity to act now rather than wait. With rapid growth that we're seeing here, every approval without sustainability measures built in is a missed opportunity with long-term consequences. This project can serve as a pilot for best practices in sustainable design, setting a precedent for responsible and forward-thinking growth and development in Orangeville. I have a couple of questions in line with that. Is there a plan to incorporate permeable pavement or rain gardens to reduce runoff and improve groundwater recharge?
Hopefully, yes. The challenge will be for permeable pavers, there needs to somewhere for the water to go.
Okay.
Because of the bedrock condition, like rock is pretty shallow there, you're not infiltrating into rock. So if the site does not lend itself ideally to a permeable paving parking lot. What we have done is over-designed our stormwater treatment facility to help store the water longer before it gets released, out into the creek ultimately. So yes, we'd like to put, if we can find a spot, we're in the middle of doing testing now and drilling. If there's a portion of the site where it does lend itself to permeable, yeah, for sure, we'll look at it. But given that you can't push water through a rock, it may not lend to it.
I've 2 more questions. Is the project considering high efficiency HVAC systems or EV charging stations?
Yeah, so
okay.
EV charging.
EV? Okay, that's good. Thank you. That goes above and beyond the building code, so that's fantastic. And would the builder be open to working with the town and community stakeholders, which you're already doing with the CVC, to ensure that the project serves as a model for future sustainable developments?
I think it's a gateway into town. It's a perfect, yeah, for sure. Working with the town, working with the Conservation Authority, for sure. It's definitely going to be we want this to become a project of note that people will, want to know about. Yeah.
Thank you. Sounds like it's already on a good foot that way in terms of environmental sustainability. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Councillor Prendergast. Councillor Sherwood, did you have a question?
Yes, through your chair, Chair Taylor. The presentation that you gave tonight indicated that a timeline, and your timeline stopped tonight. So I'm asking, when can we anticipate that building being demolished, and when can we anticipate occupancy? And I have another question, but.
The hammer.
I know.
So we understand that tenancy with the tenant ended in January. So basically the cleanup of the site can go on right now. That could be done before the recommendation report. But I understand that to avoid any uncertainty on approvals, demolishing the building will take place following the recommendation report and the approvals, just in case, to avoid any uncertainty.
Okay, so couldn't really.
Mr. Ward, did you want to add perspective on that? When do you anticipate that happening?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. As the delegate indicated, to not sort of have any implications for the land use decision ahead, it'd be prudent to wait for that decision to take place before demolition proceeds. As long as the site remains in compliance with occupancy or property standards, there's no action to be taken to mandate demolition of that building.
Councillor Sherwood.
Thank you. I have a follow-up, if I could, please. I would assume with some of these being 2 bedrooms and 3 bedrooms, the demographic will be some young families. This is probably more likely a site plan question I'm asking, but my first thought when I visualized is where the children are going to play, they're going to run across 4 lanes of traffic to go to Rotary Park. I'm wondering if you could consider in part of your 60% of your open conservation space, if you could consider putting a tot lot in there with just a little miniature playground for any young children that are there, so that we don't have a circumstance where children are running over 4 lanes of highway to go to a park.
Yeah. We can consider that.
Very good. Councillor Sherwood, are you okay? Councillor Stevens?
Thank you, Chair Taylor. Mine's more of a site plan. Do you know when the site plan will be coming back to a council? Do you have a?
Right now, we haven't applied yet for a site plan.
I'm sorry?
We haven't applied for site plan yet.
Okay. All right. And then the rest of my questions will come at that time. Chair of the Access Orangeville Committee, I'm certainly interested in the site plan, and I'll have many questions that night.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Mayor Post, just being formal to yourself, do you want me to go and then you take the end, or what would you like to do? Okay, I will ask a few questions and then I'll turn it over to Mayor Post to finish this off then. I'm just curious about the arborist report. I ask this every development now, and why I do is we've had issues where trees were taken out and that wasn't what our understanding was. And so now I'm just a little bit defensive about it, and I'm curious what the arborist report said and kind of what your thoughts were on that. I've walked back there. It's quite, well, it's well treed, and I'm just curious what your plans are.
So I can give you some numbers. So the trees that are coming out was basically the ones right between Tim Hortons and our site. It's an overgrown hedgerow of nothing significant. So the trees have been studied, they've been identified that worth saving. Are they native? Are they basically over the years just been, they're glorified weeds, to be honest. So that's the majority of the trees that will be removed. We're removing 32 trees and planting 41 just on the site. Part of the creek rehabilitation, removing 93 trees, planting 493.
What size will you do? Are they?
They're a range of everything from 60 mil, like so 2 to 3 inch caliper. So they're not just saplings, like they're.
That's great.
There's 1,400 new shrubs. There's plantings of so that whole area that's right now is kind of derelict in behind the building is. Yeah. And native seed mixes, meadow mix for pollinating plants and everything. So it's all being.
That's wonderful. I love the way you speak about it with such authority too. So thank you for having done that work ahead of time. I meant to start my questions by saying, first off, to all of you that are here tonight, thank you for investing in our community. I love what you're doing there, and it's not lost on me that this would be millions upon millions upon millions of dollars that you're putting into our community. So I'm very grateful. I do have a few other questions, but I did want to state that up front and recognize what you're doing. So thank you. I'm curious about the ground floor real estate, the retail space vision. You mentioned a few of the things that could be on there, and maybe it's for yourself and also for Mr. Ward. My curiousness with this is a lot of buildings still want to have retail space underneath, and I'm not sure the debate has been settled about whether or not that's the right thing for our town. So do we want more retail space down there, and has there been discussions about that? Because you'd hate to have empty spaces in that area, or should it be residential? And I'm just curious, perhaps between the two of you, who might have a thought on that. Mr. Ward?
Deputy Mayor, I can speak to that. I think there's an appetite for it, especially in this circumstance, redesignated to neighborhood commercial. So the intention is that those commercial uses would serve the needs of the residents in the immediate area. It's as opposed to, say, a service commercial, which has a broader intention to be a destination type retail or a commercial area. So I would suggest that there's merit for that on that basis. And as you are aware, we are doing the avenue study for these segments of Broadway leading in and out of the downtown. It will look at the land use composition further, but again, I'm confident in the neighborhood commercial approach for these lands.
Very good. And if I could, Mr. Ward, that kind of brings me to one of my other questions, and it's for you, and it's about that study. I love the fact that you're doing that study. We've talked in depth on this council that area of Broadway will be changing. It's not just this wonderful development, but it's a bunch of others that will be there too. And I'm curious about your thoughts on how that's going to fall into your study. We haven't seen your study yet. I know it's a work in progress, but maybe if you had a thought on that.
Sure, great question. So the avenue study, I call it avenue study. It's more of a corridor study. It's in early stages. We've done a survey. They've compiled their background review, and they're going to move more into that visioning study. I think the timing of that relative to the applications underway is a good fit. It's not necessarily a clean, blank or blind slate to work with. You have an idea of what the appetite is for redevelopment in the area as a start for some select properties, and can factor that into the visioning and development stage for articulating what that future vision is going to look like for the corridor.
That's great. I'm so glad to hear you say that. I'll just keep going. I had something about the creek sustainability, but I think that's been answered, so thank you for that. The current building, the way you're describing it, and it's the C862 reference that piques me. And we had discussions about taking down the building, and I get that now. So you won't take down the building, and I understand why we can't take down the building. I wish we could, because quite candidly, it's an eyesore, and you seem like good people. I'm sure you'd want to work with us if that was the case. My question would be as you're working on the property, is there a way to work with us and thinking about, future customers of yours and people going by that place? Is there any way to clean it up to make it look presentable? Perhaps it's boards on the building, it's cleaning up the lot, whatever that we can do, because there's a period of time here where we're going to be anxiously waiting for your final product, and it's looked awful forever. It used to be a great community, vibrant business, and time just changes things, and now it doesn't. So I was curious what your thoughts were on that.
Yeah, so I think, we're 100% ready to take it down. I think, once we have, a level of comfort from council that the application's proceeding, because we want to get it cleaned up.
Yeah, and I understand you can't take us at our word. I mean, these have to be signed agreements, but we would be, I think as a group, and I don't speak for everyone here, but I think we'd be anxious for that to be cleaned up as soon as possible. Can you just say what he's saying? Because everybody else that's watching online won't hear.
Right now, there is a tenant in the building, and we've changed it to a month-to-month agreement, so we can, within a month, we can give them notice. It's not like we have a 6-month lead time. We can, within a month, we can have them, out. And
okay. Two last things for me, if I could. It's the parking and the 1.25. I've read that report. I've spent time with our planner. I understand that concessions have been made and lots of thought have gone into this parking thing. I wish it wasn't that way, though, even though that I understand the rationale for it. It feels like we're heading towards a little bit of pain and trouble, and the way you've described who's going to live down there and potentially what that could look like, because the walkability and whatnot, I still worry about parking at 1.25. Like when I first started this job and I was told it was 1.5, I didn't like that, and now we're down to 1.25. Just curious what your thoughts are on that, and maybe if you had a little bit of rationale that you could explain to the public who's watching how you got to that.
Well, what we did looked at similar developments both in Orangeville and other communities, and looked at the numbers that they have been using. given the proximity of, close to the downtown, on transit, and a mixture of 1 and 2 bedroom apartments. So that's going to be, the numbers show that the 1.25 will work. And based on the visitor ratio and also the retail, we actually increased the retail parking to meet the town's requirements of the 1 per 20 square meters of retail space. So,
Got it.
So the numbers are showing that it will work, and based on peer reviewing other similar developments of this size.
Okay. Thank you very much for being here and the discussion. On Mayor Post, I'll ask a couple questions, but before I handed it over, I wanted to ask yourself and Mr. Koselak, Mr. Ward, what you thought about the 1.25, which your take was on that. And then the other piece one of the councillors talked to, I think it was Councillor Stevens, spoke about the exit way and how would they get out. And has any thought been given to that? Would we have no left turns I'm sorry, Councillor Andrews, no left turns there perhaps, or I envision difficulty. I don't think it's a showstopper by any stretch, but I envision difficulty, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on those two things.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I might start and I'll pass it over to Mr. Koselak to answer some of the access matters. But in terms of parking, it's sort of a trend we're starting to see, not just in Orangeville, but abroad. And certainly the applicant submission has given some good examples to that effect. Areas proximate to the core that are more walkable and more compact, there's more appetite for a lesser parking rate because there's less anticipated need. And one of the things we feel when we look at these is the per unit rate. I think there's a little more opportunity to adjust that. And the other aspects around visitor or retail, that's something we want to look at a little more carefully because that's activity that can't be perhaps as best regulated or managed by the development itself in comparison to the resident parking rate. So it's something we're seeing. It's something we're seeing that works elsewhere, and I think it's proving that it can work if it's well managed.
Deputy Mayor. I guess with the traffic, one of the things we got the traffic impact study, so staff are reviewing it. We also have a peer review consultant that's reviewing it. It may be one of the things in the future. You may look at signalizing that area, so the access coming out would be signalized, and it's also across the road from the existing entrance into the strip mall. So that may be something you'd look at in the future. It would provide a pedestrian crossing, but also a vehicle management tool. But I think we'd look at it when we review the traffic management study. I think it says, Mr. Ward was mentioning, a lot of it is local business probably. So a lot of the residents will probably go to the restaurant that's there and go to the different things. So you may not have as many vehicles coming to that as you would a typical highway commercial establishment.
Very good. Thank you very much, Mr. Koselak. Mayor Post, I turn it to yourself.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. The great thing about going last is that everybody's already asked most of my questions that I had written down, which is good. So I do just want to, first of all, thank you again, as Deputy Mayor did, for considering investing in our community. I think this is great. As Deputy Mayor said, it is a bit of an eyesore property right now, and as a gateway into our community, we want to make sure that it's as beautiful as possible. So thank you for your considerations there. It's also really great to see the additional parcels being used. I was concerned the first time around of all of that being parking, and we don't want to do that. So seeing that used for something as important as housing is fantastic to see. With that as well, I like the increase in the variety of sizes as well. Going from the 500 square foot all the way to almost 1,200 square feet is really great from looking at really the continuum of housing and trying to find options for multiple different uses. So I think that those are all really great considerations. Additionally, I'm grateful to hear some of the considerations that are already being made about being green and sustainable with the development. The one thing we didn't talk about though was waste diversion and really making sure that when this is being done that there's a strong environmental consideration when it comes to waste diversion through the construction time, but also through the demolition time, specifically knowing that we're dealing with contaminated material, and I'd love to see a really strong waste diversion plan come back for that. Aesthetically, some of my comments are lined up with what others are saying. And again, not that I find that the building is horrible looking or anything, but again, as the gateway into our community and moving into a heritage conservation district, I think it would be really great to see some nods given to the existing heritage features that we do have in the community. It also backs on to an area that is a beautiful heritage area. Some of the streets that are back there have really great, beautiful heritage considerations. And a lot of the residents and owners of those properties Properties have done a fantastic job of upkeeping those properties, really doing a lot of work on them to invest in maintaining that heritage. So I'd love to see some of those heritage components really taken into consideration when the final design is being done, and looking at some of the existing areas in our heritage conservation district to ensure that some of those are met as well. My biggest concern, honestly, was one that has already been talked about, which is traffic when it comes to the one entrance in. So I'm happy to hear that there's perhaps going to be a consideration for signals or a second entrance or something like that. Not just for the traffic reasons, but also for pedestrian reasons. 158 units, we want to promote walkability. We want our community to be pedestrian friendly. And one of the best ways that we can do that is making sure that we have safe access for folks to cross the street. It is a great area because we are close to one of the parks that we are investing a significant amount of money into redesigning and making it a destination park. So having a whole bunch of residents down there who can access that through walking or cycling is great, but we need to make sure that we build the infrastructure at the time of this development to make sure that those pedestrians are considered right from the beginning and not an afterthought. I think that already in that area we see, because the Tim Hortons and the big busy bus stop that's there, I see pedestrians constantly running across that road, and it terrifies me every time I see it happen, because they are going across 4 lanes of traffic, often in not great weather and very busy times. So I think we really need to be cognizant of how we can make that a really pedestrian friendly area. And I think that is it. So thank you very much. I appreciate your time, and I really didn't have any questions in there, just a couple of comments. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mayor Post. We wish you well in your development. You look like you wanted to say one other thing. Did you? No,
just
all good?
thank everyone for your time. Yeah.
Yeah, we wish you very well in this, and look forward to seeing the end result. So council, at this time, I'll just read the motion as it's in the agenda. That report PM 2025-001, 4850, 50A and 52 Broadway, Public Meeting Information Report OPZ 2022-01 be received for information. Can I have a motion to do that? Councillor Sherwood and Councillor McIntosh is seconding that. Any comments or questions before we go to vote? No? All in favor? Yes. Thank you, everyone. That passes unanimously. Thank you very much for being here. We appreciate your time tonight. All the best in your business endeavor. Okay, and so that brings us to item 8. It's the non-statutory public. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. So that is item 7.2 and 7. Oh, I see. 7.3. Thank you very much for whispering in my ear. 7.3 is a correspondence from Susan Parker regarding 4850, 50A, and 52 Broadway. Council, can I have a motion to receive this information? Councillor McIntosh. Councillor Andrews is seconding. Any last comments or questions regarding this? No? All in favor of receiving? Thank you very much. Okay, and so this brings us to item 8.1. And, pardon? Okay. Okay, very good. So we move to item 8 and 8 point, I guess I got to go through the non-statutory public, Madam Clerk. Read through first. Okay. Anyone who would like to speak to this matter, please call 1-289-801-5774 and enter conference ID 504-678-344#. Callers will be invited to provide their questions or comments following the conclusion of their presentation. Sometimes Mayor Post sends me messages through a meeting and I can hear her tapping on her thing, which says she's trying to get my attention, and I look over and she's not. So I'm thrown off here. So any member of the public connecting via telephone is reminded to press *6 to mute and unmute. Anyone who wants to be notified of further consideration of this topic, please submit your name, phone number, mailing address, and email address to clerksdepartment@orangeville.ca or call 519-941-0440, extension 2242, and reference Mobile Food Vendor Bylaw Update PM 202502. And so at this time, we'll have a presentation by James Bramley, who is the Licensing and Bylaw Enforcement Supervisor. James, thank you for joining us this evening.
Good evening, members of council, staff, and attendees. Bear with me as I get this brought up.
The last group was very crisp in their presentation, so you've got lots to live up to.
It's big to follow up on.
Yeah, like.
Okay. So we're moving forward the presentation for the mobile food vendor bylaw. Just to go forward on what this timeline and what brought us here was council directed staff to review the mobile food vendor bylaw in the work plan back in 2023, that'll be December. In December 16th of 2024, staff brought forward a report CPS 2024-091 to council on the recommendations and amendments that we brought forward on the bylaw itself, bringing us here today for the public meeting. After today, we'll come back with a report to council based off the feedback of this presentation. Further background, at the November 3rd, 2008 council meeting, the mobile food vendor bylaw was passed, which took effect on January 1st, 2009. It established rules and regulations for licensing of mobile food vendors within the town of Orangeville. November 16th of 2009, council meeting bylaw 2009-120 was passed, and to amend the mobile food vendor bylaw to add non-residents as a part of the definitions and a part of the bylaw and update the fee schedule. May 2021, council met and passed an amendment to sections 9.8 and 9.8.2 of the mobile food vendors bylaw, which addressed permitted locations around the municipality. And finally, May 15th, 2023, council met and an amendment was passed for section 4.2 of the mobile food vendor, addressing mobile food vendors do not require a license when attending an event initiated by the town within the business improvement area or where a special event permit had been issued by the town. So when we completed our review, the current mobile food vendor bylaw, we wanted to ensure that we are finding continuity with all of our other licensing bylaws, and specifically within our restaurant bylaws. That was our newest one that came forward. We wanted to enhance public safety and establish a regulatory framework to protect the public, maintain consistency, applying a uniform approach to the town's regulatory and general licensing provisions, incorporate best practices, review comparable municipalities and what their mobile food vendor regulations look like, and comply with legislation, ensuring that all relevant bylaws are being complied with, such as Municipal Act. A part of the proposed changes was a significant change in additions to the definitions, just to ensure that there's more clarity behind us. There has been confusion that's been brought forward. So part of this would be the licensing issuer being the town employee responsible for issuing a license. We wanted to bring clarity to a nonprofit as well. For the purpose of this bylaw, it means a charitable group or nonprofit organization, including club, society, or association that is organized and operate exclusively for social welfare, civic improvement, recreation, or other purposes except for profit or any profits or economic advantages which are received by it and are used to promote its objectives and not used for personal gain of any members or of any person. We further then define person to include an individual, sole proprietor, partnership, limited partnership, trust, corporation, and an individual in his or her capacity as a trustee, executor, administrator, or other legal representative. Also bringing attention to a special function, as there's confusions between a special function and a special event. A special function means an event that occurs on private property outside the boundaries of the town of Orangeville's business improvement area, which does not satisfy the criteria for obtaining a special event permit from the Parks and Recreation Department. Another addition we brought forward would be the vulnerable sector check, as again, this would be a requirement that we're looking to add to licenses. Again, it means the original search results of a police vulnerable sector check, enhanced screening for those employed in positions working with vulnerable persons from each police services jurisdiction within Canada in which the applicant has been a resident during the prior 365 days dated no more than 60 days prior to the submission of the application. We've also added waste. Again, we want to ensure that the areas where the food vendors are maintained for the town's cleanliness. This includes food, disposable eating utensils, paper, wooden, cardboard, plastic, glass, or metal products used in the preparation, serving, or consumption of food or beverages offered for the sale from a refreshment vehicle or refreshment stand. And again, like I mentioned before, we added more clarification for the definition of a special event. It means a permit issued by the Community Services to hold an event on municipal property under the control of Parks and Recreation Department. Also addressing the zoning bylaw means the bylaw passed by the municipality pursuant to Section 34 of the Planning Act RSO 1990, Part 13 as amended. Finally, we revamped the application to have a separate schedule that would outline the requirements of an application. And a part of the requirements for this and what are new to the application process would be articles of incorporations for any corporate entity or incorporated group. Again, documentation, this is for tracking and business and enforcement aspects for the bylaw department. If the business is operating from a sole proprietor, we also require a business operating name. This is also something new that has been brought forward for that requirement application. Part of this schedule, we need the written authorization from Public Health, Fire Division, and relevant departments. This is something that's still in effect as of right now. It's just been consolidated so it's more clear for the applicants. We need compliance with the zoning bylaw and site plan agreements. This is not a change, again, just being brought forward into the new schedule. Proof of valid insurance, a $2 million minimum, naming the town as an additional insurer. Again, this is not new. We have ourselves named as an additional insurer to provide us clarity, because sometimes when we have applicants have their insurance expire or change, we want to be notified by the insurer and not run the risk of having a licensed mobile food vendor operating without proper insurance. Again, as I stated, another additional requirement we are seeking is having a vulnerable sector check submitted by the owner of the mobile food vendor. Additionally, the letter of permission from property owners, again, it's not something new, it's just part of the schedule, and any additional documents that would be required for special events by the license issuer. A part of the schedule is the renewal process. This is just a streamline a renewal process as long as no significant changes have happened to the business or their application process, and they do so prior to their application expiring in the following year. Again, they need to provide us with completed application form, proof of insurance, the re-approval from all relevant bodies. If conditions haven't changed, then like I said, the license renewal deadline is within 14 days of expiry. And additionally, they have the right for refusal. Previous year license holders in the Central Business District have the priority to renew as long as it's submitted by January 15th of the coming year. Again, if they've already had a spot, we give them that priority to retain that position as they've had an active and ongoing license with us. We've added the updated fee schedule as a part of this to address resident and non-resident applicants for the various different mobile food vendors, including chip trucks, food carts, ice cream bikes and ice cream trucks, mobile food trucks, refreshment stands, and the selling at a special, there's an error on this. It should be a special function, not the special event. That should be amended, as well as an administrative fee for anybody attending a fundraising event where the proceeds would be going towards the fundraising and not as a profit towards the mobile food vendor. To close, the mobile food vendor bylaw has evolved since its adoption in 2008 to address emerging needs and improve clarity. Comprehensive review led by this new bylaw that wants to modernize the regulatory framework, aligns best practices and the town's licensing provisions, enhances public safety and streamlines administrative processes, ensures consistency with comparable municipalities, clarifies definitions and strengthens applications requirements. And we believe that these updates ensure a fair, consistent, and efficient licensing system that both supports the vendors as well as the community.
You're not going to say any questions?
And please provide me some questions and clarity. I will do my best to answer and follow the.
Very good.
prior-
Thank you very much for your report, Mr. Brownlee. Is anyone in the audience here that would like to ask a question? No, seeing none. Is there anyone on the phone tonight, Jerry, that would like to ask a question? No, seeing none. Okay. Council, any questions or comments? Councillor Prendergast, Councillor Andrews next. I'll work my way down here to Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, through you. I commend you for adding the vulnerable sector check for the owners of the food trucks or ice cream carts. But I'm wondering what kind of assurances can we have that the owners will be the ones operating those food trucks? You know, shouldn't this extend to the employees that would be working at that time also?
This is something we have explored, sorry, through you, Deputy Mayor Taylor. This is something we explored. The challenge we do face is when we are dealing with licensing, such as restaurants, mobile food vendors, we don't license or regulate who's operating there as when we go to a restaurant. We don't ensure that every waitress or every server has their smart serve. When it comes to us on the rules, it comes down to who we can enforce on it. So it comes down to the owner and the operator as the business, as the enforceability, and that's where the struggle for that enforcement comes from. So we set that regulation on the owner in hopes that it would be complied with, that if there's an issue there, that would follow through with employees as well.
All good, Councillor. Okay, Councillor Andrews.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Taylor. Thank you for your presentation. I feel that if I was probably about 25 years younger, I might look at a side hustle, but based on the regulations there and the licensing, but
you've got a side hustle.
Yes, I do have a side hustle. Yeah, but I'm 25 years older. Yeah, I'm 25 years older. Having said that, I did have a resident actually reach out to me, and this is more of a hypothetical question, but it's one that I was trying to figure out, looking at all of the information, where this actually fits. And so the question is, if you were having a private function at your house, you hire a catering company to come and they provide the food, they provide everything else. Could be a wedding, it could be a celebration. But this resident said, well, I'm looking at it a little differently now. And what happens if I decided to hire a food truck to be sitting outside of my property and I decide to have a function with family and friends? Where does this line up? Because again, I see where the regulation applies to specific locations, but there was a piece that you spoke about from a private function perspective. Can you provide me just with a little bit of clarity on that, if you don't mind?
Absolutely. Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Deputy Mayor Taylor, through you. This is again where we want to provide clarification, the difference between a special function and a special event. The purpose of having a special function within here is to provide outlets for such events, as we've had problems come up in the past where a school has an event and they want food trucks coming forward. We didn't have anything dictated out through that. So through having a special function, again, we want to ensure that there's complying with setbacks and regulations and zoning aspects. This would go through a special function where it's a one-time thing to show up as long as they're complying with all the other bylaws, and a special function with a reduced fee. So in this situation, if they were doing a wedding or a party and can accommodate this without violating other zoning aspects of the bylaw, any traffic bylaws as well, we would be exploring this as a special function. And that's set out through the fee schedule in the back. And I do apologize that there was an error on that submission where it says special event. It should say special function.
And thank you for that clarification. And through you, Chair Taylor, just to add some clarification, the property owner, the resident, again, as through the conduit for this question, would they be responsible for the permit fee or the steps that are necessary, or just if you don't mind explaining for the sake of
it would be through the mobile food vendor operator.
Got it. Thank you. Appreciate the
Very
clarification.
Good. Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Chair Taylor. So going back to the VSC, I'm just a little concerned that the owner's probably a good, standing of the community, but who knows what the staff are. So I'm just more worried about that aspect of it. Just so you know. And then is there a location boundary? Like, is there a limit of how many we can have in town?
If you, thank you, Councillor Stevens, through you, Deputy Mayor Taylor, if you give me a moment, we do have restrictions of limitations of within the BIA and from businesses. There are setbacks. If you give me a moment, I can pull that up to give you that answer.
Thank you.
The developers had to look up things too, so it's very appropriate. Right?
Sorry, I should have gave you notice. I apologize.
Do we want to table that for?
Sure. And then I do have one last one. And when do we kick them out if they don't pay their licensing fee? When do we, chase them down, I guess?
So we do act on a complaint basis enforcement. We don't proactively go out to all of the different locations where they are. If we do receive a complaint or it is brought to our attention and we're made aware that they do have an expired license, our licensing admin does send out a yearly email reminding all applicants that it is time for renewal to provide that and would be updating the system. We do have that follow-up to verify, and then if we do determine that they are operating without a license, a bylaw officer would attend to conduct an investigation, gather the evidence, and would provide them a notice. And at this point, we would generally give them a week to submit the application. If there's no application, there's a stop or cease all activity order. And if they continue on, we would move forward with laying a charge or prosecution at that end.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Mayor Post, I'm going to do the same thing. And you don't have any questions? Okay, very good. I have two. Mr. Brownlee, my question is the special event permit on the property under control of Orangeville Parks and Rec. The situation in the summertime is always a difficult one to manage, and that is those the ice cream vendors who are mobile. They have permits, but they come onto the property, they stop, and they stay there for large amounts of time. What is the ruling on that? My feeling is they probably shouldn't be there, and then I assume you're going to say we report them, and that's the way it goes. Is that?
That would be correct.
And what is the fine for them? What is the repercussions?
As of right now, there are no short form wordings submitted for that. Currently, we would be, again, issuing that notice or notice to vacate. If they do not, or they fail to comply, we would move forward with a Part 3 summons. And those fees that would be sought after would be on recommendation of our prosecutor. But at the end of the day, it's approved by the Justice of the Peace that we don't have that final say what that charge would be. I will speak that moving forward with the administrative monetary penalties, this is something we're bringing into that where we can set those monetary fees, where if we find that they're operating without a license, we can issue a penalty notice at the site right then and there to prevent any ongoing activity, and any concurrent or ongoing violations can be addressed as such. But we still have the capability, if we want to extend that enforcement, if we don't find that these small penalty notices or smaller penalty notices are doing the trick, that we can still use the POA and bring them to the court and seek a higher fine, as it would be generally a business or corporation where we could seek those higher fines. But when it comes to an individual, the general maximum fine in court would be a $5,000 fine, but that's generally after several attempts. Through experience, it's
very
$1,000 at most.
Just for council's background, what I'm referring to specifically is there'll be a kids event. Specifically, it's usually soccer or baseball. The team is sponsored by XYZ Orangeville business. And then a competitor rolls up in the parking lot and isn't allowed to be there and is selling their wares. And obviously that creates friction, and certainly we wouldn't support that. So that's where my question was. And then my last question is the non-resident fee for a vendor. It's essentially 20% more, as seems to be the idea. What is the background? How did we arrive at that? Do we want it to be more? Is there a business rationale for it? What's the thought process?
For these fees, again, they were set within the previous bylaw, and we did an evaluation on the surrounding municipalities on generally what those fees are looking like, and that's where we kind of took an average from what those are looking like. Again, nothing was set in stone. If we want to explore increasing that is something we're agreeable to explore, and increasing that fee for non-residents.
Okay, so you're leaving that sort of open-ended. For me, like my sense would be is we'd want to support Orangeville businesses celebrating and earning money within the four walls of our town. And I'm not sure that an extra $100 is something that would stop them from doing it. And my sense is that number should be higher, and it should be higher to an amount that would create a second thought. So my sense is if it's 500, it should be 1,000 for a non-resident. Just throwing it out. I don't have any science behind that, but that would make me think maybe I don't want to do this.
And when on my report back, I can provide the statistic or the numbers from the surrounding municipalities and the rationale to that. Again, I don't have that in front of me to provide. If we're looking to match similar to what the surrounding municipalities is, and that's kind of where we base this bylaw and certain regulations are. But again, I'm more than happy to explore increased fines on that aspect.
I'd just like to have the discussion, that's all. Oh yeah, Mayor Post, please.
Just to your comment, Deputy Mayor, as someone who organizes community events, it's already extremely challenging to get mobile food vendors to come. And I think it would be prohibitive if we increase the fee to non-residents any higher than that. Even some of our local organizations like the Legion, they bring in mobile food vendors as well. And I know they've been struggling to get mobile food vendors who are available to come and attend their events because there aren't as many registering in our community as there were in the past. So I would hesitate to raise those fees further because again, like Blues and Jazz, Celebrate Your Awesome, all those community events are always looking for food vendors to come and participate, and it's already a bit of a challenge.
Thank you for that perspective. Okay, any last questions from council? No, seeing none.
Sorry, if you do mind, I do have an answer to the question that Councillor Stevens did bring up about setbacks.
It's too late, Mr. Brown. Please go ahead.
To the question about setbacks and minimum distances from other municipalities and limiting the amount of food vendors in the area. As for setbacks, we do require a minimum of 90 meters from any other business with operating in food and whatnot. We do provide an exemption, but the owner of such restaurant would have to provide that to the food vendor, saying that they are okay with them working in a closer proximity to their business. And as for limiting the amount of food trucks, we do have a limit within the central business district. And that's set out through our general regulations, that there's a maximum of 6 just food carts within the BIA area, and we do limit them to a maximum of 3 on the intersections of the northwest corner of First and Broadway, the south side of Broadway between 114 and 136 Broadway, and the northwest corner of 2nd Street and Broadway. So that's where the restrictions are, is when it's down in the BIA section.
Very good. Councillor Stevens, you good with that? Okay. Thank you very much for your report. Okay, so seeing there's no further questions, just double checking. I'd like to approve the motion as written in the agenda that report PM 2025-002 mobile food vendor bylaw be received for information. Can I have a motion to do that, please? Councillor McIntosh, Councillor Stevens, any last questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Yes. Thank you very much, everyone. And Mayor Post, I hand the chair back to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor, and thank you for chairing both those meetings. The recommendation now is that the confirming bylaw listed below be read 3 times and finally passed, which is the bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Orangeville at its public meeting held on February 24th, 2025. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Andrews and Deputy Mayor, all in favor? And that is carried. And a motion to adjourn, please. Councillor McIntosh, seconded by Councillor Stevens, all in favor? And that is carried. Thank you for joining us this evening.